what really is the differentiator are your personal stories. And under that umbrella, there are three. One is the founder story. How did you get to where you are today? The second is the company story. How did you start your business or company? And the third is the client story. Who has worked with you, whose life has been changed or impacted because of you.
Hi, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. In this weekly show, I bring you in-depth conversations with thought leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs who inspire us to create ourselves into the people we want to be at work and at home. And now, let's get on with the show. Hello, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I am super thrilled you're here. And I'm also incredibly thrilled to have this week's guest. He is a new friend and one of my teachers, and I'm super excited to have Mike Kim on the show. Mike Kim is a speaker and marketing strategist who specializes in brand strategy and copywriting. He's been hired by some of today's most influential thought brands, including John Maxwell, Donald Miller, Suzanne Evans, and Catalyst. For years, and this is so interesting, he's made the shift from certain kinds of professions to the one he's in now, because for years he was the chief marketing officer of a successful multi-million-dollar company near New York City. Nowadays, you're going to find him speaking at conferences, looking for the next great place to scuba dive, or sipping a glass of Macallan 15. And I want to know why 15 and not 18, but we'll talk about that. All while he's teaching everything he knows about branding, entrepreneurship, and life through his hit podcast, Brand You. Welcome, Mike. I'm so glad that you're here.
It is an honor to be here with you, Isolde, and to everyone listening in. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to add some value to you today.
Oh, I'm I'm positive that you will. I want to start off with actually something a little personal. I love that you scuba dive. Are you NAUI or PADI certified? And where has been your favorite place to dive?
Oh, that was easily Oahu in Hawaii.
Really?
I went with, well, this is in large part because of who I went with. I went with my friend Steve, who is a retired Navy SEAL. And look, you can go scuba diving, and then you can go with scuba diving with a Navy SEAL, which means jumping out of a helicopter.
I love it.
Getting one of these, jet propulsion things to stick between your legs so you can rocket through the water underneath while you're under the water.
Uh-huh.
And we cleared probably about 3 miles worth of underwater, for about 3 miles using that thing. And look, scuba diving, you don't swim when you scuba dive. You just kind of float and just go with the flow, right? Man, we that was another level. So yes, I don't know if it was Oahu itself or it was because of Steve, but all of that was just awesome.
It's amazing to me. In order to scuba, you have to do all of these different. My scuba instructor was a Navy SEAL, Andy, and he had us do things like we had to tread water for half an hour, we had to swim a mile, and we had to swim one length of an Olympic pool underwater on one breath before he'd even teach us. And it's interesting how he said that you have to have those skills to begin with in order to be able to learn. And I'm wondering, when you do this, when you do the work that you do, what skills did you bring to it to begin with? What did you have that interested you about helping people market their brand or develop their brand that you had before you even started? And then what skills did you build in order to be able to do it so effectively?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'm thinking through this, but I think what I'm really good at is simplifying things.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been a reductionist. I've always been a simplifier, if you will. And whenever I've learned something, I've always tried to reduce it down to the bare bones in a way that I could understand, whether it was music, whether it was writing, whether it was business, marketing. I've always been sort of a reductionist because, you think about how the Pareto principle, right? 20% is responsible for 80% of the results, right? And when I went into the marketing space, I brought to the table that tendency to always simplify things. And then number two is my writing background, to be really honest. That was what helped set me apart. And those two things combined, I was able to simplify people's writing and communication. And I was able to say a lot in very little. And I think that was really, really what helped me, um, especially as our culture and society has gone more to a soundbite culture.
Mm.
We speak in sound bites, or we read in headlines. So I really hit the market at a time where the internet was causing everybody to consume content in a different way, just because there was so much of it. And it really worked to my benefit. I, spoke in tweets, I wrote in headlines, and that's what really helped me. And when I work with somebody, when I work with a client, teach a course, I'm always looking for that one little thing, one or two little things, that they have that can really make them jump out, and then we can put marketing campaigns behind. So yeah, it's those two things.
That's so fascinating. And it's interesting to me, this idea of simplifying writing in headlines, writing in tweets. What do you do when you have someone like me who is an over explainer? When you're working with someone who goes, well, let me tell you what happened from the dawn of time, and then gives you a James Michener novel. How do you listen? You said you listen for that nugget that you can build a campaign around, but do your eyes glaze over? What happens when you're trying to figure out what that one little nugget is from someone who speaks as much as, say, I do?
Yeah. Oh no, my eyes never glaze over. That's because what my job is to listen and try to find that little nugget, that one little thing. And oftentimes, and you've heard me say this, sometimes the best ideas are hiding in your body copy. So for
Mm-hmm.
those of you who may not be familiar with copywriting is simply the words that you write for an ad or a campaign. If someone sends a marketing email, that's called copy. Anything that's on a brochure or a flyer or a pamphlet, that's all copy. And so what's interesting, Isolde, is that I really think that the roots of this are found in how we are taught to write academically.
Mm.
When you go to school, when you go all from elementary all the way up through college and grad school, right? And you write a paper, the title is often the least emphasized thing of your work, because the
Mm-hmm.
teacher knows that you're going to submit it. And what you're trained to write and how you're trained to write is to put salient points into the body of the essay.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is marketing is completely backwards, right? Internet reading is completely backwards. We don't have readers anymore. We have scanners, and we have skimmers, and we have scrollers.
Mm.
And so when I read someone's body copy, this is why I ask people to write stuff out. And they think I can just give them a great headline. No, I need some context. So I'll have them answer some open-ended question. I'll have them kind of just vomit on the page. And chances are they're going to write the way that they've been taught in school for 20 years. And I'm going to be able to find something that's sitting in the body copy that should actually be the headline of that point. And so, yeah, I listen very intently, but I'm also trying to simplify and reduce, right? What is it here that is the salient point? What is the main thing? What is the thing that we can use as a headline somewhere? Years ago, a couple of years ago, I went to visit, I was in Amsterdam, and I visited the Vincent van Gogh Museum.
Mm.
And Van Gogh, he's just
Of course.
crazy paint, right? Gobs of paint on the canvas. And my mother was an artist, so I had grown up around his work and his stuff. And it was the first time that I ever saw a Van Gogh painting in real life, and I was just blown away because of the texture, because of the layering, and how thick the paint was. I walked down the hall, and I see this other exhibit about him, and I was shocked to realize that very few people know that in addition to being a painter, he was actually a great draftsman. And he drew. And I took a picture of this because it jumped out at me so much. It said something along the lines of, he dedicated the first years of his artistic training entirely to drawing, because he believed it was the root of everything for an artist. And when I look at how he built his repertoire, it said this: without the distraction of the colors of his palette, he could concentrate fully on the power of line. That's awesome, right?
Wow.
And so when I look at a brand,
Mm-hmm.
I realized looking back, I really dedicated the first years of my career and my marketing training entirely to copywriting. And I didn't get distracted by colors and fonts and ad campaigns and how to run Facebook and social media ads and all that kind of stuff. I just worked on becoming a good writer and being able to communicate concisely, and then everything layered on top of that.
Mike Van Gogh Kim. I like it. So, so I'm curious about this idea of layering on top. So you layer all the other things having to do with social media and branding and all of that on top of the clear lines of copywriting. And yet you're also a musician, and there are so many textures that come with having that musician sensibility. How do you reconcile the part of you that's a reductionist with the part of you that's a musician who might, I don't know if it does, but I certainly feel that way, who might want to experience the full texture, the full harmonics, the full sense of music?
Yeah, so it's interesting because even when I was even when I was involved in music, so when I was in my teens and in up to my mid 20s, I did a lot of music and I wrote songs. And what was funny is that I just always gravitated more towards the lyrics. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just who I've always been. And there are other friends of mine who gravitate towards melody lines and chords and color and all that sort of stuff, which I liked. But I found that my primary expression, even in music and in the arts, was through what we were really saying with words. So no
Mm-hmm.
wonder I became a copywriter. I didn't know what copywriting was when I was younger, right? I didn't know that. So we all have our strengths, and when you look at the personal brand space, that's who I work with. I work with coaches, I work with consultants, speakers, authors. I just kind of put them under this one big umbrella of thought leaders. They're paid to share what they think.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a thought leader and you never share your thoughts, you don't have any marketing. Because last I checked, people cannot read your mind, right? So for this particular niche of people, this particular group of people, they need to talk. They need to share what they know. They need to showcase their expertise. And to do that, most of them are not Instagram stars where they're, it's all photo driven. The substance of who they are comes through their words,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what they use when they work
Mm-hmm.
with clients. And so, I don't coach a lot of people who are Instagram models. I don't coach people who are in fashion industry.
Mm-hmm.
Those are much more visual mediums. Instagram, it's almost like the main social media channel these days. And I used to struggle a lot with, what do I do on this channel? I'm not a fitness model. I'm not going to just, show up and post pictures of my food. This is not very substantive. And I had to learn how to communicate with the written word through a very visual medium.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what communicates to people. So all that to say, I found the tribe of people that I can best serve, because the demands of social media and online communication require better writing of them. It's required. And so that's where I've really found my niche, and I really love it. I just love serving these people. I love helping the best minds and the deepest thinkers get their work out there, because what really ticks me off is that we have a lot of good people out there with some really brilliant ideas. They're just not as good at marketing as other people are. And other people tend to be a little bit slimier with their marketing. They're willing to do things. And I don't like that. I want to help the good guys. So that's how I've ended up where I am.
And we are grateful. Absolutely. So let me ask you, how do you differentiate a personal brand from a brand for a product or service or a company's brand? What's the difference there?
Yeah, so it's interesting because personal branding is now becoming at the forefront of corporate, right? They're starting to use these terms like personal branding. And over the last couple of months, I've actually received a number of inquiries from larger corporations to come and teach their team on personal branding. And at first I was confused because I was like, have you read any of my stuff? All I do is tell people to quit their day job and run their own business. I don't think I'm the right guy for you. And I realized quickly what they meant by personal brand is just your etiquette and how you look and how you present yourself. And so then I had to kind of go a little bit further than that and say, well, I want to help people build a personal brand business, a business around themselves. So when I look at a company, if we look at a few, Spanx is a great example. I think her name is Sarah Blakely, I believe it is, right? And it's just immensely popular and successful global brand, workout clothes, the bottles, the whole thing. And Sarah Blakely she is just as much of a part of the brand as Spanx is, but both have very distinct identities. If you look at any one of the sharks who are on Shark Tank, it's the same thing. They've all got these brands, but they themselves are also a brand. They are a leader. So when I look at a personal brand business, it is really, I reduce it down to, I distill it down to, you are the business. People are buying you. They're not just buying your services or your products, they're buying you. The interesting thing about the personal brand business space is that you can't buy someone else's personal brand. I mean, even if I went out and bought Sarah Blakely's Instagram following, bought her Instagram account, got their email list, I'm not her. She has a tribe of people who are fiercely loyal to her, not just to Spanx. And if she started a new company, chances are a good portion of those people would follow her to that new company just to see what she's doing. And that's really the nuance and the key to building a personal brand. Another fellow who I can just spout off is Guy Kawasaki. And it's a marketing professional. You guys may have or may not have heard of him. But through the decades, he's been hired by various companies as their quote unquote chief evangelist. I mean, he's basically their biggest marketer. Did it for Apple, did it for all sorts of companies. But he himself is also a brand. People follow him because of his marketing advice. So it's kind of like a hand-in-hand partnership now where a company will say, Guy has such a big personal brand following that if he likes our product and he endorses it and we hire him, he will spout off about our product for 6 months and get it to a new audience. So we're gonna do this deal with him. And that's really the power of personal brand. That's how it works.
It's so incredible. I know he was at Canva for a little while and he was their chief evangelist. I'm not sure if he's still their chief evangelist, but I can absolutely see what you're talking about. If you follow him, if you've read his books, I can see how when he endorses or says he likes a company or a product, you'd be more likely to trust that product is good because it's he who's saying it. So I think that's so fascinating when you're doing that, when you have a really solid personal brand. Now, you help people with their personal branding. And the question I ask is how? What do you do for brands and businesses or thought leaders to figure out what they want to say in their messaging? What methods do you use to help them, especially someone who doesn't really know how yet?
Yeah, so the classic consultant's answer, right? I just ask them a lot of questions. Right, just ask them a lot of questions, get them talking. It's just like I said before, because we get so much in our head and we communicate, we write or we talk the way that we were taught in school. Right. And so what I try to get them to do is just talk, get that body content out there, and then see if I can fish out anything. So one of the things I'll do is I ask them 3 questions, which I've now called the Personal Brand 3 or PB3 for short. And I honestly have been surprised, Isolde, at how much this has helped people. I just thought they were really simple questions. People go, oh my gosh, these have really helped. So the first question is, what pisses you off? And I use strong language on purpose because I want to get to their emotion. I want to get them out of their head, and I want to pull it from their heart, right? And I'm from New Jersey, you're in New York, and so we kind of talk like that. We're a little bit like that, right? And I'm like, so what pisses you off? And when I say that, what I'm really trying to get at is, what is the injustice that they see in the world? And then the second question is, what breaks your heart? and I'm trying to draw out the compassion that they have. And then the third question is, what's the big problem you're trying to solve? And that is the business model. That is what their business purpose is. Business is nothing more than solving a problem for a profit. And so when I look back on these questions and I leave them purposely open-ended,
Mm-hmm.
people give me the most random or seemingly random answers to those questions, but it actually gives them clarity as to why they're pursuing a particular course of action. So when I got to a point, we all do this, right? We all get a little bit lost in our own work. Where I've been in the coaching space and marketing space for a couple of years, and I didn't want to be known as a marketer. I felt like I was good at marketing, but there was more that I wanted to do with that. And so my assistant at the time, she's like, "Why don't we just take you through your very own questions?" And so we did this in New York, and she asked me, "So what pisses you off?" Because she'd seen me do it a million times. And I answered all these things. And what breaks your heart? And so I started telling all these stories. You know what pisses me off? Like that time where I was working as a CMO for a company, and the day after Thanksgiving, they called me into work. And there was no reason for me to go into work. And I was really ticked off about that because my mom and sister had been over my house for Thanksgiving, and I had to go into work the next day. And I was really annoyed. I mean, not just annoyed. I was pissed off. I was like, this is an injustice. I hate that someone else is telling me what days I'm allowed to spend with my family, especially after I bust my tail for them all year. That
Mm-hmm.
really ticked me off.
Sure.
And what broke my heart was I worked with some really brilliant people. It was an educational company, and I was working my side hustle at the time. And I was like, you know, you could start a blog and do this, and you could start a podcast and do that. And man, they were just caged animals. They were like caged animals. They had a caged life. And that really broke my heart because they were really intelligent people. And so when I got finally Isolde to the question of what problem do you want to solve, it all clicked because then I said, I want to help the small sliver of the population who wants to control what hours they work and who they work for and who they work with. I want to help them start a business so that they can really live at their full potential and do work that they love and believe in. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to teach them marketing because I can do that really well. Well, when I said that, I had new life in pursuing my career as a business coach. And you'll notice I didn't say, you know, what pisses me off, really bad advertising and really sucky copywriting. It wasn't about that. Now, there are people who are like that. Guess where they are? They're working at ad agencies like Ogilvy or something like that, right? And God bless them. We need them. But I found my truth as a business and marketing coach was rooted in something way deeper than just good copywriting and good websites and good advertising. It was a much deeper thing for me. And it actually fueled my kind of second wave into pursuing a career as a business coach full time. So in the last couple of years, I've dropped probably 95% of client work. I don't do a lot of client work anymore. I just do teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to coach people rather than doing the writing for them, because that's really what is aligned with my truth. So those three questions: what pisses you off? What breaks your heart? What's the big problem you're trying to solve? That's what I run everybody through when we start. And it's pretty incredible to see what people say and come up with.
So fascinating, because speaking from my own personal experience going through those questions, what's interesting is that I found where I had resistance, and that sort of spot of, oh, I'm dancing around what I really want instead of really naming it. And there was a process of almost evolution for me to get to that place. Maybe it's an evolutionary perspective change. When you work with people, do you find that kind of thing happens? How do you find them? Do people have resistance towards thinking in this way, or do you find that there's a kind of an easy path forward once they start?
I think it depends on the person I think it depends on their personality. It also depends on what their professional experience was prior to that. So it's interesting. Where I found the most, I wouldn't say resistance, but the most struggle, where it feels like they're almost like slogging through the mud. with people who have come from very regulated industries and backgrounds.
Mm.
So law, healthcare, government, education, the military. Like if you think about those 5 industries, for example, you make one mistake, you get your wrist slapped. You make 2 mistakes, you're gone.
Mm.
And you can get sued. You can get fired. You can get sued for malpractice. You have to, if you're in the military, do another lap around the 3-mile trail, right? You don't clean your gun right. And so folks who come from these industries, I have found, have had a lot of that self-expression kind of either repressed or just kind of regulated out of them, and when they come to me, I'm just trying to like tap into like, who were you before? I'm pulling some like Tony Robbins motivational stuff here, right? We're trying to talk about marketing, but I mean, who are you? What pisses you off? What breaks your heart? And so we're trying to connect to the core there. Now, on the other hand, you have folks who are like, yeah, I just don't care. I just want to kind of do whatever I want. And they're sort of like a fire hydrant, trying to water the lawn with a fire hydrant. They had 10 new ideas they wanted implemented yesterday,
Right.
even though they thought of the idea this morning. And so with them, it's a little bit of a different approach because I have to slow them down or help them to empathize with and understand that no matter how good the water is and no matter how much you have, you can't grow a green lawn in one night. The lawn can't take it, and the market can't take you because you're spewing so many different things out 20 different ways that like there's no clarity as to what you're doing. And so with those people, I often have to slow them down.
Uh-huh.
So you can't water the lawn in a day and expect it to be green. Certain things take time. And so we have 2 people who are on the opposite ends of the spectrum here. My job as a coach is to help them all find some sort of a middle way forward in a way that makes sense for them. Someone who comes from a very regulated background or is struggling with that muscle of self-expression because they've just had it beat out of them for so many years. I'm just like, post one thing on Facebook just this month, and that's a huge deal for them.
Right.
For the other guy, it's like, can you just post 3 times on Facebook, and can you have them actually have an aligned message, please? And that's a different type of struggle. So as a coach, it's my job to kind of find the medium and what works for them while also considering their market. Their market can't handle everything that they're throwing at them. More is not always better. So yeah, so there's a lot of nuance to that, but people face it all different ways.
That's okay. So I am closer to the latter person that you described. I tend to have 42 ideas before breakfast. But what should people do first? Like if I'm in the process of doing it, working with you, but what should a person who maybe is in the middle of the road of that, not necessarily a regimented, let's say, former government employee and not necessarily a creative who's going, woohoo, what should someone do when they're first starting to build a brand identity? Are there steps they should take? Is there an order? What should they be starting with?
Yeah, so I have a little kind of framework that I've created over the years that kind of takes them step by step. And we've sort of covered the first one, which is their personal story.
Mm-hmm.
And where that is rooted in it are the answers to the PB3 questions. I used to think that people wanted to talk about their clients and their customers because that is what would be good for business. You and I know that, right? But newsflash, people like to talk about themselves more, right? And so what I had to do was adjust the way that I worked with people because I had to get them talking. Otherwise, they actually all sounded similar to other people out there. They all sounded the same. And so what really is the differentiator is are your personal stories.
Mm-hmm.
And under that umbrella, there are 3. One is the founder story. How did you get to where you are today? The second is the company story. How did you start your business or company? And the third is the client story. Who has worked with you, whose life has been changed or impacted because of you. And those are all personal stories. I actually just told you guys a bunch of personal stories.
Mm-hmm.
I told you about my family coming to Thanksgiving. I told you about my coworkers who were living like a caged life. And so if you kind of think back to everything I've shared so far, it's all been personal stories. And that's the foundation, because that's the differentiator for everything else that I do. The second thing that we'll then do is we'll build out a platform. And it doesn't mean a website, it doesn't mean a podcast per se. It just means one home base where someone can come and find out everything they need to know about you, or enough about you to know if they want to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they have that, the third step is really positioning. How do you want to be seen relative to your competitors? Now, this is where a lot of people get it wrong, because if you don't have your personal story, you don't have your position, you don't have your platform, it's hard to establish your positioning. All of these steps are like digits in a phone number.
Mm-hmm.
You can have the right digits, but if they're not in the right order, you're not dialed in. And this is why so many people struggle. So you have your positioning. I'm going to be either Louis Vuitton or I'm going to be Walmart. And both companies make a lot of money, but they make them in very different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you determine that, then you can figure out what kind of product, that's step number 4, that you want to create. And then step number 5, how to price the product, what you should be charging. Number 6, the pitch, your sales pitch, how you're going to sell the product and what you're going to say. And then finally, number 7 is finding partners to get word out about your product. Where a lot of people go astray is they say, Mike, I want to create an online product. Or they ask me, how much should I charge for my services? And I'm like, oh, they don't have the previous steps built out. That's
Right.
why they don't know. If you don't know if you're Louis Vuitton or Walmart, you're not going to know what kind of product to create. You're not going to know how to price it, and you're not going to know how to pitch it. And so it's just a very simple step-by-step thing. This is one of the things that I'm working on and putting into a book that'll be out later this year or early next year. But I've taken people who are starting up from zero and with a side hustle through that same framework. And I've taken people like John Maxwell and Tom Miller through that really established thought leaders, because at the end of the day, the principles are all the same. The principles are all the same. The only thing that's different is, the amount of people that might be on their email list or following them on social media. But all of us get lost in our own way. And we just need kind of a roadmap. And that's what I hope that this framework does for people.
If that framework is something that you follow, how do you know when you know the right answer? In other words, I'm following this framework that you put out, and it makes a lot of sense. But
Mhm.
how do I decide if I'm going to be Walmart or Louis Vuitton? How do I figure that out? Is it my own internal guideposts? Is it the following I already have on social media or my fans that might tell me? Where do I get that knowledge so that I can then move on to the next steps?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really rooted in who you want to help, right? And that all comes back down to, again, I know it sounds like a broken record, but it's the answers to the PB3. When I shared those answers with my assistant that day, I realized the thing that really pissed me off and the injustice that I saw in the world and the compassion I had for people were stuck in their day job, right? And so that's a starter market,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I work with people who are in either the startup phase, where they're still trying to figure out their offering, their product, their niche, or the ramp up phase, which means that they have a couple of clients, they make a little bit of money, but it's very sporadic.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that they're struggling is they don't have a clear marketing message, which is why I can help with copywriting. And they don't have a clear marketing channel. They're a little bit scattered in how they're marketing. They're usually just marketing by word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And number 3, they don't have any differentiation. And that's why I do storytelling with them, because that's the differentiator. Now, what's interesting is that as my brand has grown and over the years, and as I published more and more content, I had a reputation among my peers, or even those who are ahead of me, as a very good copywriter. And so they hired me for copywriting and marketing strategies, and not necessarily how to get them out of a day job, because they were already established.
Right.
So what I started to find was that I had actually two different markets, and I had to determine which one I wanted to serve en masse, right? And so what I did was, you asked me a question about positioning. How do I figure out which one I want to be? Um, what I chose to do was market and brand everything I do as if I'm on par with my best clients and
Mm-hmm.
their peers. So A-list people in the industry, and yet gear the content towards a starter market. And I think if I tell a little bit of a story, I think this might make more sense. So,
Please, because I'm confused.
yes, right. Okay, so I think this will help, right? So 3 years ago, I was in London. Okay, I was in London, my first time in London.
Woohoo.
And yeah, and so I was like, I was out there with some friends, and I met this girl, and we went on a couple dates in London, right? She was really cool. She was really nice, right? We spent a bunch of days together, just kind of getting to know one another. And it turned out, and she liked me because I was like the only Korean guy in London. She happened to be Korean. And I know you guys can't see me, but I'm Korean. So, I was kind of like some unicorn in the rough, right? I was like, oh, she's like, wow, an Asian guy, let alone Korean in London. This is crazy. You want to meet for dinner? And so we hung out a bunch, and she happened to design handbags for Burberry, the fashion brand, very high-end fashion brand.
Mm-hmm.
And she took me around like the designer area of the city, and she's like, this is that advertising firm, that advertising firm. And my marketing nerd brain was going crazy. I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And she told me something I will never forget. We've since lost touch. It didn't really go anywhere, but I still remember this. I tell this story all the time. She's like, most people don't know that our most popular and best selling and biggest moneymaker for Burberry is the $300 handbag. And I was like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, it's the $300 handbag. And I was like, your scarves cost $500. And your other handbags and your raincoats cost $1,000 or $2,000. And then it clicked for me, Isolde, that what Burberry did was they marketed everything as if they were Louis Vuitton and on par with all these other high-end fashion brands. But they created a product that was for the every man and the every woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so their positioning was very high end, but the product, at least one of their products, was more affordable. And so people actually bought this product feeling like, I'm getting a Burberry bag. I've arrived. I've made it. But it was still for the every man and every woman. And when she told me that, everything clicked. I was like, oh, no wonder my brand has worked. Because I've marketed as if I am one of the A-listers in the industry, but my products are geared towards the starters. And so they feel like when they buy that product, they are getting a true expert A-list person. And that's positioning. So I don't know if that makes sense. We can go into that a little bit more, but that little story about what she told me about Burberry made everything click to me. Just because you target a starter audience doesn't mean that your marketing should be budget or ghetto or basic or whatever these words are that people use.
Mm-hmm.
Position yourself, use strong branding, use good visuals, have great sound on your podcast and your videos, and look like you're at the top of the game while you're still reaching or trying to help people who are just starting out. And that's how I determined it.
That makes all sorts of sense.
Hmm.
And well, in Ann Arbor, where I went to college, I went to University of Michigan, there was a little tiny shack restaurant, tiny red shack called Le Dog. And the guy sold hot dogs, and you could go for $1.25 and you could get a hot dog. But he was also a cordon bleu chef, and every day he would make specials, like the shishi fufuist specials that he could think up, and he only made 25 of them, and you had to be one of the people who ordered in advance, and you could be one of the 25 who got the specials for that day. He was known for the hot dogs by many of us. He was known for the cordon bleu by a very few of us, and he said that it scratched his itch for making the shishi fufu food, the cordon bleu, all of that. And yet everybody knew him. Everybody knew Jules as the hot dog guy. Now, when I hear
Yeah.
you talk about Burberry, and I'm hearing the $300 bag versus the $2,000 bag, what are you looking to do if you're Jules and people know you as the one and only a few select know you as the other? What do you do to expand your reach? Do you focus on the
Mm.
25 and make them really exclusive, or do you focus on as many people who want to buy a hot dog for $1.25 as possible?
It depends on what kind of business you want to build and what eventually will light your fire. So I share this and I say, hey, yeah, I really love helping the starter market. But the reality is that starters don't coach with me. I take coaching clients once in a while. I have mastermind groups. I'm running 2 mastermind groups right now. And the people in those groups are a completely different caliber. But because you follow a little bit of my work, I don't
Mm-hmm.
talk about those a lot. It's like his cordon bleu. There are people who respect what I do and see that, and they want more from me. And yet to the masses, I'm known for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've intentionally stayed in that space with the masses because I will never run out of leads. There will always, always be people who are looking to take that first step. The beginner market is the biggest market.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be the highest paying per individual market, but it's the biggest market.
Mm-hmm.
And oddly enough, having the publicity that comes to me by serving the bigger market actually makes it easier for more high-end people to work with me.
Interesting.
It's funny because nearly all of my high-end clients, and by high-end I mean 5 figures or above, some have paid me 6 figures, they've all found me through referrals
Mm-hmm.
of friends who are in the same industry or the same space as I am. They just know that I happen to be taking contracts at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so they said, "Oh, you need someone to help you write your book? Call Mike Kim." And these really influential people would fill out my client intake form. It was hilarious. They would fill it out, and I'd follow the process that I've taught for years. I'd book a really quick call with them, and I'll never forget this one best-selling author, multiple times best-selling author. If I said his name, everyone would know. And we got on this call, and he says to me, he says, "Hey, so I heard about you from such and such. These are friends of mine, and I know they're friends of yours. And I just spent the last day reading through as many of your blog posts as I could, and I really like your writing." Now, think about what I just said there. That guy, I was referred to him, so he filled out my form. That was enough. But then he went and stalked my content. And what he found was that I had a body of work. This is really important. I had a body of work that he could look at. And he was like, this guy's a pro. Like, he knows what he's doing. I'm getting this guy on my team to help me. That's what pushed him over the edge. If I didn't have that, I would have been just another expensive contractor. So the content that I'd created all these years for the starter market, he read it. He knew the content wasn't for him, but he could see my expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And that has happened, that has happened so many times over, which is why, like, when a freelancer calls me and says, "How do I grow my business?" I'm like, "Create content." They're like, "That doesn't make any sense." I was like, you just got to do it. You have no body of work. I don't care if you've had 5 A plus clients. You've signed NDAs with all of them. You can't talk about them, and it's not their job to promote you. They paid you to do a service for them. So this is why I am such a strong advocate for personal branding. Whether you run a company, whether you're Sarah Blakely and you run Spanx as a multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar company, whatever it is now, whether you're on Shark Tank, or whether you're someone like me who has a quiet corner, who sits on a quiet corner of the internet and speaks to several, groups of people a year and does all this. We all need a body of work to be able to showcase ourselves, showcase what we think, showcase what pisses us off, breaks our heart, what the problems we solve are, and get that out there and build that intentionally. And so when you ask, how do I know that I have it? It's when you're able to just answer very quickly, hey, I do questions all the time, right? So one of the questions that I'll ask people when we're starting out is, hey, so what do you want me to pay you for? Like literally, what do I get when I give you my credit card? And which one of my friends do you want to talk to? And that throws them off because we're so much in this space of, who's my ideal client, and what kind of online course do I create? And I would ask people these questions like, so what do you want me to pay you for? And I work with a lot of coaches, and they'll say, well, I want you to pay me to help you get life balance. And I'm like, yo, last time I checked, I can't buy a bottle of Life Balance. What even is that? No, I'm asking you, like, literally, what do I get? Literally, do I get your phone number so that we can talk for an hour? Do I get an online course? Do I get a book? What do I get? And they don't know. And which one of my friends do you want to talk to? And they say, anyone who needs life balance. I'm like, no, that's not an answer, right? You're making me do all the work. Do you want to? And so I literally will run them down through these examples who are real people that I know in my life. Do you want to talk to my friend Sarah? She's 25, just graduated from pharmacy school. She's single. Do you want to talk to my friend Karen? She's 38. She's a news reporter in New Jersey. Do you want to talk to my friend Henry? He's 42 and works as a recruiter at Whole Foods. Do you want to talk to my friend Jen? She's 55, has a daughter in college. She's a physician. Which one do you want to talk to? And they're like, wait, what? I don't, wait, what? Oh, you know what? Actually, I think Jen would be good. I think Jen, yeah. Now we have a little bit more clarity. We have a little bit better of an idea of who they're trying to work with. Because most of us, when we start out, it's like, my ideal client is anyone who will pay me money. And that is not a good way. You can do that for a little while, but man, after a few months or a year or so after that, you're going to get really tired because you're going to get frustrated with the lack of clarity that you have or don't have. So it's just questions, and I reflect them back on people.
It's so fascinating because that idea of spreading yourself too thin because you're trying to be all things to all people. It's what you just said was it's very practical. Who is the actual person? And I think that's great. But when you're trying to say something on the internet, to whether it's a podcast or blog post or video or whatever, how do you say something that's really unique? I mean, if you're saying create content to everybody, what you had happen is you were recommended word of mouth, and then the person went and stalked you. So there are all of these things that had to happen in order for that to happen, for him to go, oh, I need to work with Mike Kim. What do you do to differentiate yourself? How do you balance that signal to noise ratio so that you are unique, but you are also visible?
Yeah, I think really what I tell people there is that I was recommendable. And if you think about that word, commend means to praise. Mm-hmm. And recommend is just to repraise someone. Now, you and I, we have a lot of colleagues in both of our respective industries. I know that none of my I have big name friends in my little corner of the internet, right? These are people who are internet famous they're not famous. They're just internet famous in our little world, right? So right. I'm fully aware, and I admit that I'm not a self-important kind of person, right? And I look at these friends of mine, right? Ray Edwards, Jeff Goins, Grant Baldwin, on and on it goes, right? And I know none of these suckers have ever bought anything from me. They have never bought a product from me. They don't listen really to my podcast unless they happen to be on it. They don't read my blog posts. They just look at what I'm doing on social media, and they just think, well, Mike's just one of us. He just knows what he's doing, right? And so my content is not geared for them, but they will be my biggest sources of referrals ever, because they just respect that I know what I'm doing. And so that's what I'm like. I've had people in my mastermind group that I've probably made for all the people that have gone into my mastermind groups, I would probably say an estimate of them would be 70% of them. I've probably directly made them more money than they paid to be in my groups, right? Mm-hmm. And it's because I got to know them. I don't consume their content. I just know them for one or two things. And recently this happened with a gal who was in one of my groups, and for a year. Her name is Katrina Kibben, and she's an expert in HR and recruiting. That's all I know about Katrina. I consume very little of her content.
Mm-hmm.
I just got to know her because she was in my mastermind group. And when my other friend Paul Martinelli was running a summit, he said, "Hey, do you know anyone in HR? We want to speak. We want to do an interview for people who are going back into the workplace, post COVID-19." And I just said, "Yeah, I got somebody, Katrina." He said, "Okay," and he didn't vet me. He didn't grill me 20 questions. I was like, "Katrina's the gal you need." And I told Katrina, "You need to go do this with Paul." Now they're like the best of partners. Now I'm out. Like I'm out. I'm like, what do you guys continue to do stuff together? Hey, why don't you let me know? Right. But that's exactly how it works in that space.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't go to my friends for a lot of business advice, oddly enough. They don't come to me for a lot of marketing advice, but they tell their friends who need marketing advice to come talk to me. And they feel confident in that because they know that I'm always continuing to build my body of work, and I'm going to make them look good. I'm going to treat their friends well. And that's all about position. That's branding, really. When people ask me what is a brand, it's essentially what people say about you when you're not in the room. That's really what it is. It's just reputation.
Mm.
And so my friends who are now partners, right? They're partners in a sense. They're that seventh and final step to building a brand. They are willing to refer me. They're willing to get word out about me because I have my personal story down, because I have a platform, because I know my positioning, because they know I sell products and I price them accordingly and I have good pitches. They feel confident referring me to other people. And that's really how it works.
So how do you get better at it? How do you, if you're a beginner, other than, yes, buy your book when it comes out, which I would also, do you know what it's going to be called, by the way, the book?
I don't know yet.
Oh.
That's the fun of it. I'm writing it before I even know.
No headline yet. But
headline yet.
In addition, perhaps, to studying with you, what's the best way to improve your copywriting? What tips do you have that people who have businesses, where would they go? How can someone use it to help grow their business, copywriting, especially for me, especially small business owners and creative entrepreneurs? What should they do?
So this is going to sound a little counterintuitive, and it might sound like, oh my gosh, that's too much work. But the dirty little secret to how I got better at copywriting was not necessarily through a course. Courses and books helped me.
Mm-hmm.
But the first course I ever took was from this little company out of Florida. I wouldn't say they're little; they're quite influential. It's called AWAI. I don't even know what it stands for, like American Writers and something Incorporated. And I bought this little $200 course on copywriting. And they said this: we're going to give you 20 of the best sales letters in history in PDFs. And we want you to hand copy the letter, every letter 3 times into a notebook. And then we want you to stand up and read the letter out loud. Now, Isolde, I was like 30 something at the time. I was like, what is this first grade crap? Like, what, right? And I was like, what? I just paid $300 for a PDF so that I could be told to write this thing 3 times. I had to swallow my pride. And I started, and I immediately understood why they said it. Because first, these were some of the best letters ever written. Second, they were written, obviously, by some of the best copywriters who ever lived. And third, as I did that, I could feel how the writer was linking his or her thoughts, how they were saying certain things that I would never say, the pacing and the tone of the letters. And I just started handwriting these letters. And I did I've got a notebook somewhere in my office with like a bunch of hand copied letters. And I hadn't written anything by pen since like college, right? Because computers are everything now, computers and phone. My hand was dying. It was so sore. But I tell you what, that transformed my ability to write copy. That was the most important thing that I ever did. Now, these sales letters back then were 2,000 or 3,000 words long.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have a lot of time to devote solely to that. But if you can just read and understand some of the principles of copywriting, and then maybe take a social media caption that really grabbed your attention from someone you follow, and just do what I said. Like a social media caption is going to be like at the most 2 paragraphs, right? And you just hand copy it. And then you hand copy a second time and a third time, and you just read it out loud. It will jump out to you why you really liked that particular caption and why you really liked the way that this person writes. And that is like one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give when I hold copywriting workshops. Not right now in person because of all the lockdowns. I've made people do that in the live workshop, and they just think it is. They look at me like I have 3 heads, but they'll go back and they'll say, "Oh my gosh, this was incredibly transformative. I did not realize how much I learned by just doing this simple exercise." And I'll give them a couple of captions that I've written or sales letters that I've written. And they go, "Wow, okay, I can see why you did this here, made that decision there, and broke up the copy in this place and in that place." And that's really how I got better at it.
Study the greats. I love it.
Study the greats.
It makes
Study the greats.
It does. It makes a lot of sense. And I could actually keep you here for the next 6 hours chatting with me, but I know you have a day to get back to. So I have just a couple more questions, if you don't mind. First, what are you curious about right now? What are you learning?
I'm learning how to write a book. And I joke a lot about that because it's not an easy process. And I always joke that I'm telling people I'm writing a book instead of actually writing it. But the book for me is like, it's actually more of a personal reason why it's been such a struggle, because I actually signed a book deal 4 years ago. Most people don't know that. I signed a book deal in 2016.
Oh, wow.
To write in 2016 and publish it. And the publisher has honored that deal for the last 4 years. And the reason the book didn't come out in 2016 is because my personal life went through hell. I went through a divorce. It was out of nowhere, complete chaos. My ex-wife and I are friends. We're friends. We're cordial. That's as cool as it can be in that regard. We had no kids, so it's a little bit of a different story. But what they don't tell you when you go into business for yourself and you don't have to go into an office is that you end up having way too much time to loathe and to when your personal life goes through a mess, you don't have any distractions.
Right.
And so I'd wake up, at noon, 1 p.m, because I just had no energy. My emotions were drained and everything. I was just so devastated. And then I muster up just enough energy to do a coaching call in the afternoon and write 1 email. And then my friends would drag me out of the house and we go out and, just eat or drink a lot, and then it just perpetuated the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And so this book for me I've been teaching this content for a really long time. And certainly I've learned a few additional things that will make the end product better when I finally finish it. But to me, it feels like a reclamation of something that was lost 4 years ago, an opportunity that was lost. And I've often looked back on it and said, damn her, and damn, the timing of all that. Business would have been in a much different place now. Had I written this book 4 years ago, I would have probably been writing my 2nd or 3rd book by now. And so there's a lot more attached to that than just writing this book, right? It's not just a book. I'm really, on a personal level, I'm trying to reclaim something that I didn't, felt like, I should have had or it was taken from me in some ways, right? Now, at the same time, I have to be honest. I mean, if I prioritized writing this book, I could have got it done, despite what I was going through, or despite, especially the last couple of years, because all that ended about, a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've just been busy trying to recover with the business and getting it back up to a place where I felt was healthy. And now I have the creative energy to do this. And so what I'm really, and you can bet your bottom dollar, all of this will be a story that I tell one day. It'll be another personal story that I put into my vault, right? How I overcame a huge personal devastating setback that one dream died. It almost took out a second dream, which was to become an author. And that's really what I'm learning. That's the story that I'm living right now.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever, any of you are listening to this, whatever you're in the middle of, you just realize that you are living a story that you're going to tell one day. And that's what excites me. You asked me what's exciting me right now. It's that I'm actually finally doing this. I'm actually a lot further along than I thought, because all I did was just take a bunch of webinars and blog posts and course content I've created in these 4 years and put them into the books and just to clean it up.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a much bigger story than that. It's reclaiming something that I felt should have been out in the world 4 years ago, and feeling like I didn't help the people I could have helped in these last 4 years because I didn't get this done, or because life threw a curveball at me. And so there's a lot of, I don't want to say frustration or anger or anything like that, but it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to come out the gate swinging with this thing. Because there's a lot of people who missed out because of what happened on my end of things, that didn't get this book that I know it can help. And so I'm going to come out the gate swinging with this thing. And so that's fun too, because I'm in a much healthier and much more whole place now. And so, yeah. So they say you can't fire a cannon from a canoe. And I really like that. And I feel like when I look back on it, that is what it would have felt like. And so now I'm a little bit more on stable ground. So I've had to, be grateful for where I am and be present in the timing of all of this, and just do what I can now to get this thing out into the world. So that's what's exciting me right now.
I think that's wonderful. And I want to encourage you on something. I don't know that you would have had the wisdom and the wherewithal in 2016 to do your story as much justice as you're going to do it after having survived and then recovered from the trauma of all that. So I think that is something that you can credit yourself with, and I hope that you are.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely have learned a lot from it, and I'm a much better person for all of that. And we talk about telling stories in our marketing, and like, Mike, is this a marketing thing? Well, yes and no. Everything's marketing, right? And when I tell this story to people, I mean, they're gonna resonate with it, because
Sure.
literally everybody I know has had a dream die at some point in their life, and it doesn't mean another one has to die. And that's the story I'm going to tell around this book, and it's going to be the truth. To be honest, It's going to be the truth. So,
absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so grateful that you have shared your truth and your wisdom today. I as I said, I could keep you another 4 hours, but I won't. I do have one last question that I ask everyone who's on the show, and it's a silly question, but I've found that a lot of times the answers are profound. And the question is this: if you had a plane that could skywrite something for the entire world to see, what would you say?
Ooh, you are enough. That's it. You're enough. I think we look so much to external validation, and we underestimate what we're really made of on the inside. It doesn't mean we don't need help, but what I mean by you're enough is that you're worthy enough of loving yourself, and that would be the short version of it. So yeah, that's a great question.
The skywriting question. Yes. And what's really fascinating? I got to tell you, the biggest and most frequent skywriting phrase that people say is exactly what you just said. All of the people who are the biggest thought leaders that I have on the show, that is the sentiment. That one, and be kind is another one that people say, but you are enough. If I were to do a sort of a graph of how many people have said what, so many of you whose work and whose lives and whose thinking I respect end up saying you are enough. And so you are in phenomenal company, like Grammy Award winners and Tony Award winners and people like that. That's what they say too. So you, such wisdom, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate your time and your wisdom and your knowledge, Mike. I'm really, really grateful that you were here. I'm going to put all of the things that I have for you in the show notes, all the various social media, all of that's going to be there, so that if there's anything else that you feel like people should know, please, this is your forum. Anything, any last bits of wisdom that you have, anything that you want people to know, please share it. And then we will say goodbye.
I guess I would say this, one of the other things that I like to say is that life is short, but it's the longest thing that we ever do. And so whatever that means to you to live a full life, do it. For me, it's eat great food, spend more time with my loved ones, and never say no to a good adventure. And just realize that life is short, but it's the longest thing we ever do. So, seize the moment, live in the moment, be grateful, don't wait. Be patient, but also don't wait to be present in your life. And that's what I would say. So it was an honor to be with you and to be with all of you who are tuned in today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This has been Mike Kim and Isolde Trachtenberg for the Innovative Mindset Podcast. Until next time, I send you all of my love. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2020. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I send you all of my love.